Omakase, the life and words of author M. Kieran. If this is our first time meeting each other, let me give you a brief introduction. My name is Max. I write books for a living, but before I did that, I used to work at the laboratory of an evil corporation. My pronouns are they, them, and as my final act of revenge against the evil corporation I worked for, I released the plans for their super duper secret greenhouse operation, revealing its sole weakness to the rebels, and in turn, bringing the downfall of the Empire. Okay, that last one may or may not be true. Hey there! Welcome back to my writing advice and inspiration podcast, Omakase. Every week, I tell you a little bit about what I've been doing, what I've been writing, what media I've been consuming. I also answer viewer questions. And for the last segment of the show, I go over a creative exercise. Today, we will be doing brainstorming, world building in reverse. But before we go on with anything else, I have 3 items of housekeeping. The first one is that the song that you're hearing at the beginning and at the end of this show is titled Dream of Green by the OC Jazz Collective and OCRemix.org. You can find the link to that particular song in the description of this podcast and video. The next item of housekeeping on my list will make more sense when I go over my update, but for reasons that will imminently become obvious, next week's episode will not be delayed. It might just be a little bit more on the shorter side, for reasons that will become evidently obvious in a second. The last thing I want to say is that if you would like to support my content, but Patron is not your cup of coffee, you can always treat me to a cup of tea instead. You can check out my coffee link, that is ko-fi.com/mkieran. There should also be a link to it in the description of this video/podcast. You can treat me to a one-time donation. I will still give you shoutouts at the end of the video. I have 2 shoutouts this week for lovely people who treated me to a cup of coffee. With all that said and done, let's move over to the first segment of the show, my week. What have I been up to? What have I been doing? Mostly feeling bad. If you follow me on Twitter, you might have caught a gist of what happened to me last week. Or from my point of view, this week. Podcasts go up a week early to patrons, or in the case of this one, like half a week early. For the last month or so, I have been working a lot. And through working on a lot of projects, and through, of course, the mix of real life, we all know the difficult people in life. I ended up kind of burning out. It came to a point a few days back from my point of view. It came to a head, and I was just so tired. And you know me. I love working, I love what I do. And you would think I am the Taurus in their relationship from how stubborn I can be sometimes. But no, my lovely wife is the Taurus, and she immediately noticed that I was miserable. She noticed that my output had decreased dramatically, and that I was almost dragging my feet because I was just so tired. Again, through a combination of a lot of work and personal things happening, and of course, difficult people. I feel like difficult people are at the core of like most big problems. It's not so much a task is difficult. It's not so much, a task is daunting or something is in the way. I feel mostly is like difficult people get in the way and make things difficult for everyone involved, especially when things don't have to be difficult. But anyhow, that is a conversation for a completely different podcast. My lovely wife... you know what? I'll do the bit. I was feeling terrible a few days back. I was really tired, and I was like, maybe I'll take half a day off. And my wife took that as the big red flag that it was time for me to take a break. She tied me to the bed, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna let this happen. You never know. You never know. I'm gonna let this slide, see where it goes. Nothing came out. That's a terrible bit. That's a terrible bit. I played it better live when I was making the joke to my wife, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna let this play. She didn't actually tie me to the bed. She forced me to take a couple days off. And my lovely spouse, love of my life, the sweetest, kindest, smartest person I know, she was right. I needed a break. I knew, because I know. In retrospect now, I realized that there were telltale signs that I was burning out, and that I achieved absolute 100% burnout. Because every waking moment, I felt like my battery was at 0. I felt like I was getting like the blinking battery icon on the upper right corner of my vision, just blinking red, and I'm like, oh no, I'm fine. You know what? I'm feeling so good, I'll put in some overtime today. No, that had to stop. So I took a break. I'm going to talk a little bit about listening to your body. Don't be like me. I've said this before. I'll say it again. Life is too short for you to make all the mistakes, so learn from me. Learn from me being bad about taking breaks. I really need it. I really needed a break. And it was funny because part of the reason why I didn't want to stop, or I didn't want to just take a break, was in part because of my daily writing challenge. And I realize now in retrospect that I was being really hard on myself, and tools should be the most useful to us. Tools should be tools for us. They should work for us. We shouldn't have to work for them. And I did kind of realize, I don't want to think of it as breaking the streak, because just thinking about it makes me dizzy, and it makes me just kind of go, ugh, because I wasn't doing daily writing to, have a big streak as some sort of ego thing. That wasn't my goal. I was doing it to stay close to the writing. But I do also realize, and my friends around me were all like, yeah, Max, you went a little bit hardcore, which is a thing that I do sometimes. I do, well, you all like to say that I go hardcore. I like to say that I am dedicated to my passions and purposes. But I went a little hardcore. My lovely wife and I were repurposing the daily writing thing, where I'm coming up with ideas of ways of adapting it so that I can continue to work on my projects and let you guys know that I'm working on my projects and be held accountable for working on my projects. Because I want to get a bunch of novels out. I really want to. Trust me, nobody hates how long it's taking these novels to come out. Nobody hates that more than me. You think you hate it? You think you're like, Max, I just want to read your next novel. Trust me, nobody hates that more than me. But I also realized that I should kind of probably treat myself like a living thing. I should probably do that. We're running some ideas right now. Thinking of it like maybe treating it like a piggy bank. Instead of I write every single day, I report, today I did this. Today I put these many coins in the piggy bank. Or the coin bank. Today I invested this much time. Today this is what I did to further my goals and my novels. Maybe something like that. We'll see. We'll see. Ultimately, at the end of it all, I wanted that to be a challenge to inspire me, to get more stuff done, to stay dedicated to the writing and my passions. But I also realize, as apparently a living, breathing thing, that I should also probably not go at it hardcore. I'm gonna actually write that on my little board. Don't go too crazy this time, Max. Now, so, because of that, I had to take like 3 days off. The first 2 days, I literally just spent them in bed just watching videos. That's how tired I was. I was tired enough where I was like, sleep, eat, sleep again, maybe watch some videos, and mostly just stay in bed. That's how tired I was. And I knew that I needed rest. One, because I have some you know your body. You know your body, or we think we know our bodies. I know my body, and I recognize now that when my battery is empty, I have like a physical tick. Is that what you call it? I have my left eye twitches. when I'm like empty. And it's funny because for like the last week I was like, oh, it must be the light or something. Maybe I have allergies. I'm sure it'll go away. I'm sure it'll go away. Another day. I'm sure it'll go away. Another day. I'm sure it'll go away. You know how it went away? Me actually getting some rest. And now I recognize that. And now in the back of my mind, I'm like, immediate red flag. The instant my left eye starts to twitch, I know. It's like, Max, get some rest. Get some rest, you big fool. So, because of that, I missed a bunch of days. I missed 3 days. That meant that this podcast for patrons was a little bit delayed. Sorry about that. Just like 3 days. And that means that the space between me recording this and the next episode is shortened. So the next episode will probably be shorter. Mostly because I just won't have much to talk about in regards to my week. So there is that. So aside from that, what else did I do this week? Part of learning to stop being a fool and to listen to my body, I've been kind of restructuring my mornings, having a little bit more time for this, a little bit more time for that, adding more padding just in the case that something happens. Remember, add time for padding. The worst thing that could ever happen is, oh no, I'm working earlier today than usual, as opposed to feeling like you're always in a hurry. My wife and I, we have another channel. It's the complete polar opposite of this tone. If you're interested, I think it's always linked at the end of my YouTube videos, but I'll tell you. It's Dango Duo, DangoDuo. It's a silly channel. If you want to see me not be serious, if you want to see me make horrible jokes, then that's the place to go. But we are, as the monthly video, we are reading a bunch of manga, Japanese comics, about LGBT characters or by LGBT people. And as a part of that, I've been reading My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness by Nagatakabi. And I'm not going to go in depth. I'm just going to drop this in here right now. That is a story about a young woman's struggle with depression, mental illness, eating disorders, and learning to love herself. And my God, that story, I don't use this word often, okay? I mean, but I'm going to use it like 20 times in the next 2 minutes. My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness by Nagatakabi is raw. That is a raw story. I don't want to say it's not a good time. I'm just saying that I really have enjoyed reading the story. I'm almost done with it. I've really enjoyed reading the story because I feel like there is no glass window, there is no wire screen, there is no fence, there is no microscopic film between the page and the author's thoughts. There is no filter. She quite literally just talks about what she felt. And there is, how do I say this? In memoirs and in retrospect, people tend to format things to make themselves look better. Phrase things in a way to make themselves look less pitiful. Or to lessen the hit of pathetic things that might have happened to them. Or misfortune that befell them. Nagatakabi does none of that, and she fully talks about things that are horrible. She talks about her own feelings. She talks about dread with a very familiar tone, and this is not a happy story, but it's one that feels so inherently personal. I sometimes feel like she just directly talked to me. That's what the lack of a filter did for me. It was very effective. It's a very raw story. She just talks about these things in a very straightforward manner. And you know, if you have friends who have dealt with that, you know, if you have ever wanted to talk with somebody, you feel as though you're both talking in different languages and translating yourselves into the other's language. It's hard to talk about mental illness and depression and eating disorders, and she just talks about them. She just lays it on the table, just lays it down. She just says the things, and that's really raw. If you're interested in it, let me just pick it up. We'll be doing our full thoughts on the other channel over about 3 different books about LGBT characters or by LGBT authors. My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness is published by 7 Seas. I think all the books we're reading are by 7 Seas. They do a bunch of stories about LGBT characters or LGBT authors. But anyhow, Raw. If you have read it, you know what I'm talking about. If you're somewhat interested in a very raw story like that, then I recommend it. Unless it literally goes to heck in the last 20 pages, which I absolutely doubt it, because my lovely wife purchased the second book and read it all in one sitting. So I get this slight feeling that it might carry all the way until the end. It's all a true story, by the way. I forgot to mention that. There's no fiction here. It's just absolutely true. But anyhow, I read that. It was fantastic. It was nice to just have time to just sit down and read a little bit of stuff. Just watch videos, relax. Healing is important, and I would be lying to you if I told you that I have mastered that skill. I have not. I am terrible at taking time off. But now I will do my best to be better. If not for myself, I'll be better for my wife. Do not make her worry about me so much. And now, oh, I got gushy again. Let's close it down. Let's finish this segment and move over to the sponsors for this show. Omakase is a podcast crowdfunded by you. Wonderful people like you who listen to this on iTunes or Google Play Music or Spotify or YouTube. You are the ones making this possible. By pledging as little as $1 a month, you get really cool perks over at my Patreon page, patreon.com/mkieran. As I mentioned, $1 gets you to listen to these podcasts a week before they go live on YouTube, and if you pledge more, you get more cool perks like shoutouts, like access to my super duper secret writing zine, and more. But for now, I would like to give a big shout out to my super duper big patron, Atalak. Atalak has a DeviantArt page. You can learn more about their writing and their art over at deviantart.com/Atalak. That is AHTILAK. And as for the rest of my big patrons, A. Howard, Alyssa Dudley, Amelia, Angela, Brenda, Caitlin, Gilbert Gaudreau, Irina Phoenix, Joe, Lacey, Mark Maruska, Nicola, Pat Eichson, Polly Craftool, Rain Misoa, Soul Muse, and Synexia. Everybody gets a shout out. I give the big patrons get a shout out in the middle of the video. Everyone, including the lovely people treating me to cups of coffee over on my coffee link in the description of this podcast and video, everybody else gets a shout out at the end. If you pledge $1, you get me to yell out your name. And if you happen to have a French name, listen to me butcher it. Okay, real talk. Slow down, Max. Slow down. I said French names like those are the only ones that I consistently mispronounce. That's not true. That's not true. I feel like there's a whole hemisphere where if you just give me your last name, I'll just trip and fall down the stairs perpetually. Took me like 10 weeks. That's not true. It took me like 5 weeks to be confident saying Gilbert's name. And now, for the second segment of the show. Every week, I take questions from the comments of my videos, from my email, and from Twitter. If you have a question, you should send it my way. I have been working through my backlog of questions, and I'm not saying that I'm starting to run out. All I'm saying is that this is a prime opportunity to just be like, hey Max, I've got this really interesting question. Answer it. And I'm like, oh, let's go. Let's do this. Or if anything, just to get your question down in the queue. So there is that. First question is about a video I released, or in a podcast I released a little while back. My first Omakase bonus episode was on the 3 bad writers I met when I was in college. Writers who tackled writing in a very ineffective way, and each had their own shortcomings that made their own writing less effective, less enjoyable, and less immersive. The second writer that I talked about in that video, I forget the name I gave him because I made up a name just to, protect his identity. And I forget the name I gave him. But that second writer, the thing that he did was that he would bloat his writing with very complex synonyms. The joke that we had on that video was changing the name Purple Prose to Purplescent Prose. Just finding obscure words to replace his more common, I'm holding quotation fingers, normal words. And in the process of that, he made his writing very obtuse. And as someone who had to do feedback to this person and actually read his writing, I ended up spending more time grabbing a dictionary to understand what I was reading than actually being immersed in his stories. That example, I think, is very easy to grasp. No one actually argued the particular point of, bloating your writing with big words. Everyone kind of understood, yeah, of course, that makes the writing less effective if people have to stop every 2 minutes to look up what you're actually talking. And if you're using obscure words that no one's ever heard of anyway, or words that haven't been used since, the 19th century. But in spite of that, I got a question, an understandable question, about synonyms. The core of the question was, in relating to that particular video, what my thoughts were in regards to grabbing the thesaurus and looking for words to replace the ones that you have. Not maybe with complex words, but just words that maybe aid the flow or make the story just appear better. My feelings regarding that are pretty similar to the feelings I had with the other guy. Just on a much more granular level, more zoomed in, more focused, because I feel like we're getting to the actual core of the problem. I didn't get to tackle this last time, and I am just so glad that I got this question on Tumblr, because this here helps me get right to the point of what I was talking about, and because we were talking about purple prose and big, scary words to make your writing appear more, quotation fingers, sophisticated, I didn't actually get to talk about this in particular. What about situations in which you're not so much finding bigger, more sophisticated looking words to replace your own normal words, but rather you're just looking for other words to, quotation fingers, improve your writing? Wow, there was a lot of quotation fingers in that sentence. I think, honestly, that unless you're not certain about what you are saying, you're pretty much always better off, especially during the first draft, you're better off writing the words that come to mind. Now, what do I mean by this? I think part of this is related to a writer's voice, their own particular voice that they have, that they carry through onto their writing. I think that's very important. But part of that is also meaning, and especially when it comes to grabbing synonyms of a thesaurus, you can end up at a situation in which replacing words with words that kind of mean what you wanted to say originally achieve in only telling the reader something similar to what you wanted to say originally. And I'll give you my favorite example for this, okay? Quiet is a synonym of silent, but they don't mean the same thing. If you are looking at your writing, you're thinking quiet is just too normal of a word, I'm gonna grab silent instead. Those two don't mean the same thing. Quiet is something that makes very little noise. Silent is something that is devoid of all sound. Not the same meaning. These are the sort of things that if you try to pull something like this off in a writing class or with an actual editor, they will point it out. Why? Well, because it kind of leans towards adding inconsistencies to your writing. Again, because, and there's countless examples, but I just love quiet versus silent because it's just so clear. You think to yourselves, well, they are very similar words. Yes, they are synonyms. They share a similar meaning, but they are not the same word. And at the end of it all, if you go through the trouble of exchanging your normal words for words you think feel better or flow better, what are you ultimately achieving in the story? Because what you may think is an aesthetic improvement to the story, to the reader, to your beta readers, it may appear as a flaw of the flow, and also a muddying of the waters, because the image that you imagine, that you saw in your mind as you wrote it, suddenly becomes altered. I like to imagine like a glitch, like parts of the image that you wanted to paint are kind of blurred out and chunks are missing because the words that you used originally to describe that scene are now changed. There is a difference between a quiet morning that can make it seem pleasant, but a silent morning can feel a lot more ominous. Words have meaning, and it is through this meaning that we paint images. And just like you could say that quiet and silent are just different shades of blue, there is a difference between sky blue and dark navy. They're still blue, but a dark navy sky and a blue sky evoke different feelings. And at the end of it all, I feel like this is all just rooted in fear. Fear of someone thinking that our writing is not very eloquent or very elegant. I keep coming back to that John Steinbeck quote that I always misquote, and I always paraphrase, but he talked about wanting to write stories for the working person. For the kind of person who, didn't have a high education, stories that anyone could enjoy. And I've always taken to that, I've always liked it. Not only because I have experienced many times trying to read someone's writing, especially in college, this happened all the time, and they would pull out an obscure word. Not an obscure word that is common, because we have phrases and words that are common to our lexicon, things that we say in real life. Words and phrases that we have borrowed from other languages that, yes, are rare, but within the speech that we say, it makes sense. But I remember finding these obscure words that were like really, really silly words. Words that ultimately meant, purple, or meant something else. Something just so simple that I just sat there after wasting time looking up a dictionary to see what the word meant, and I just sat there thinking, why didn't you just say purple? Why didn't you just say quiet? Why didn't you just say another word that I could have painted in my mind, not only faster, but without breaking the flow of the story? I can do this forever. I can go on for much longer. But at the end of it all, I want this, okay? When I sit down to read the story, I want to read your best version of the story. I want to see the truest version of your story. We're not going to see the same image. I'm not going to see the same main characters. We're not going to see the same world together. But I want it to be as close as possible, so that I see the amazing world you painted, and I meet the amazing characters you created, and I feel for their struggle. I think it is completely okay sometimes if you want, or if you're not sure about what you wrote, like I said at the beginning, if you're not sure whether their morning was indeed quiet or silent, or something else, then I think looking up at your source is completely fine. It helps you further define what you wanted to say. But don't do it artificially. Don't do it just because you're uncertain of the language of your story. Don't do it if you feel that you're inadequate, because you're not. Because if the story's fun, and the reader can get lost in it, and they can imagine it, and they can feel it, they are too lost in the process of the writing to actually care. I feel that often writers worry a lot about what people are going to think, but they seem to overlook what people are going to think of the story. But that is a conversation for another day. For now, keep an eye out for The Perils of Synonyms. feel free to go into the comments of this video and leave your worst nightmare story of someone using the wrong synonym at the wrong time. That would be a fun segment. If I get a few of those, I might actually just read them out during the podcast. It can be things you wrote or things someone else wrote. But now, on to the second question. I always like to do one technical, one inspirational one, and here we are at the inspirational question for this week. A writerly friend reached out to me, and through their words, I came upon a realization. I managed to put together words in a way I had never done before. And I want to ask you a question. This writerly friend is terrified of sitting down to write. They find writing incredibly hard. And this pains them because they love writing. They want to tell stories. They want to change the world. They want to share their characters and the worlds they have made with everybody. But every time they sit down at the desk, they are paralyzed with fear. I am certain that we have all been there. We all tackle that fear differently. Before I blocked Twitter on my computer and my phone, I would just think to myself, oh, I better see what my friends are doing, just to see if I'm missing anything. That was my way of getting away from the fear. Other friends of mine in the past are known to suddenly realize their desk is very untidy, or that they forgot to organize something, or that their desk is not in the correct position of the feng shui diagram, and it's time to move everything in the room so that every color is in the correct cardinal position. We escape out of fear. Fear of ourselves. Fears and doubts. Doubting our own potential and the potential of our stories. We have all been there. And if you haven't, consider yourself amazingly lucky. But to all of you out there who struggle with this even now, there is a slight chance you might be procrastinating writing by listening to this podcast. And that's okay. But I have a question for you. A question so bold, so radiantly bright, it might just scorch away your fears. What are you afraid is going to happen if you sit down to write? What are you afraid of, really? What are you afraid is going to happen? When I thought about that, those words, they came to me as I was reading the writerly friend's question. It's the thing, when sometimes I see people who are suffering, friends of mine who are carrying heavy loads, not physically, but invisible loads, and sometimes I think to myself, and I offer advice when they request it. Life sounds miserable when we're carrying all these invisible burdens. Is there not an easier way? If you're afraid of this, wouldn't life be easier if you were not afraid of it? We sometimes get so lost in our own problems and lost in feeling terrible. Understandably so. Our bodies, our human minds are all programmed for survival. So when a threat emerges, we can only think of that. Think of the threat. And sometimes fear always fear is the reply. But like I tell my friends who are dealing with things, and like I want to inspire you, what are you actually afraid of? What are you afraid is going to happen if you send the resume? What do you think is going to happen if you send that email? What are you so afraid of that you won't pick up the phone and call your mom? What are you so afraid of? What do you think is going to happen? A friend of mine recently struggled with coming out, and this particular friend spent so long thinking about what could go wrong that they never stopped to consider what could go right. When they came out to a group of people, they did not only receive support, but someone came out to them and thanked them with tears in their eyes. For now they understood a part of them that they did not before. We spent so long thinking about all the things that could go wrong. We never stopped to think what could go right. You put a word, and then another word, and then you have a sentence, a paragraph, a page. A page every night. A chapter every week. Brick by brick, building houses, building bridges, step by step, making journeys. Word by word, novels. Day by day, life's worth living. What are you so afraid of, Ratterly friend? Were this the final part of the podcast, this is where I would cut it. But I hope this helps. That would be a nice ending. Additional, if I can recommend some advanced reading, let me bring it up real quick. I would recommend watching Chris Hadfield's TED Talk. That is Chris Hadfield, the Canadian astronaut. The video is titled What I Learned from Going Blind in Space. That right there is a very good video, and it may or may not have completely destroyed my fear of spiders. So I'm gonna just slide that under the door if you're interested in watching a really good video by a really effective speaker on the regards of fear. Now, let's move over into the last segment of the show, the prompt. Every week, I give you a writing exercise, or a thinking exercise, or a personal exercise like last week. This time around, and I might have to hurry up a little bit because I know that I'm going a little bit long today. But today, we're going to be doing brainstorming and world building in reverse. What do I mean by this? I have gone in great lengths in the past about the way that I brainstorm worlds, mostly by asking questions. Brainstorm characters, brainstorm settings, whatever you want, you can achieve it by asking questions. In turn, making this object more complex, not only by subtractions, the things that it is not, and by additions, the things that it absolutely is and it contains. But today I want to do a visual version of that. And it's going to look like a mind map or a family tree. If you have a piece of paper, I want you to, on the very bottom of it, draw a bubble or a box or whatever. And this is going to be the very beginning of the story idea. We're going to work in reverse because we want to write a story about something. We want to write a story about a particular subject, and I will give you what that subject is in a second. And from that particular idea, from what we want to write about, we're going to go in reverse asking and answering questions and seeking to find the people connected to those answers, simply from wanting to write a book about something. If you ever think to yourselves, oh wow, right now I'm really feeling like writing a horror novel, you can begin in reverse. I want to write this kind of horror novel. I want to write a horror novel about blank. X or Y. I want to write this kind of romance novel. All you gotta do is begin in reverse. The topic of today's reverse brainstorming session is gonna be a genre that is not new to books, but it's kind of taken a resurgence through video games at the moment. Let's play a good old death game. A death game is a situation in which several people are forced to be within one place or one grand location, and their goal is to murder one another until only one is left. We're talking about, as it is known nowadays, a battle royale. We're talking about stories like the titular Battle Royale by Kushin Takami, The Running Man by Stephen King, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, and many others. Stories about people, sometimes guilty, sometimes innocent, sometimes forced, sometimes by their own choice, forced to kill others to survive. At the bottom of this chart that you're drawing, even if it's in your mind, we want to write a story about a death game. A game of life and death, the true survival of true people. And when it comes to world building, a place, a stage for a story such as this, we must immediately begin by asking the questions. Because we're not here to do flimsy stories. You're not listening to this podcast because you want to have a flimsy story. You're here because you want a complex world that will feel real to the readers. And more often than not, half the work of that, because the first half is writing it, but the other half of it is actually thinking about how this world will work, so that everything feels cohesive. There is a lot to say about certain battle royale death game stories, where it feels as though the instant you question the setting as to why things are happening, suddenly the story kind of starts falling apart. That's way more common than you might think. So let's do the opposite of ineffective. Let's do an effective story by asking questions first. Imagine the bottom of the tree, and now let's draw a couple of branches. And again, death games is the flavor of the moment, and I've been definitely thinking about stuff like that in the back of my mind. Mostly because a genre like that is ripe for character struggles and, character versus character interactions. That sort of stuff is just just chef's kiss, fantastic stuff. And first off, for a death game to occur, it must occur somewhere and somewhen. So, as you would in the branches of a tree, you can draw out a branch and embox it with the word place or where, location, and time, when. This is the sort of thing that people often overlook, the location and the time of your story, because sometimes all you need for a really interesting twist is putting it in a particular time period. What if you were to write a story about a secret death game that occurred in America in the 1960s? A secret project that nobody heard about. Just simply, and in my brain, no script, no nothing, I just thought, well, if it took place not now, if it took place not in the future, if it took place in the past, How could that have happened? I literally just did this exercise in just the course of like a second. Well, if it happened in the 1960s, how come we didn't hear about that? Well, it had to be a secret. What kind of secret? Maybe a secret project. And I hope you can see me literally just drawing branches in the mental diagram. If it takes place in the 1960s, why didn't we hear about it? Who ran it? Who organized it? What was the purpose? Who took place in it? We're doing it. We are doing it right now. Asking questions. Thinking in reverse. We're not coming up with who started the secret government project to train people to use their psychic powers to kill each other, which I just came up with right now. We're not starting with the professor who had an experience when they were young where they discovered they had psychic powers. We're not starting with that. We're starting in reverse. We're starting backwards. We want a death game. What do we need for that? Well, it has to take place somewhere, and some when. If it takes place in a completely different setting, if it takes place in a fantasy world, or in a spaceship, under the sea, in a flying city, the location and the time are pivotal. But they're only as pivotal as the people in there. And as you begin drawing out the diagram, because when you think of the era, you can think of the people involved. When you think of the location, you can think of the people involved. And work backwards step by step. This is the sort of thing where sometimes people tell me that brainstorming can be really overwhelming because they don't know how the story should work out. And to me, in my own experience, I always tend to work backwards. That way you don't end up having characters who feel useless. You don't end up having unnecessary characters. I don't have to come up with a whole league of doctors for this secret death game that I literally brainstormed in the course of like 15 seconds. I just need the one. This person did this. Why did they do it? Well, probably this happened to them when they were young. And this is the reason for that. And in my own mind, I'm already picturing this like sprawling tree of connections. I want to write about a death game in the 1960s in America, in this part of America, with these sort of people, ran by the government. What branch of the government? This branch of the government. Under whose supervision? This person's supervision. What's the goal of it? To do this. To learn this thing. Why? To do this thing later. And suddenly, without even knowing who the main character of the story is, you already have a place, a time, an end goal. Because I feel like sometimes, and this is a thing that comes up all the time in other settings and other genres, it's not just the thing about this, but it's the thing where you often ask, what was the point? What was this person trying to achieve? What was the evil mastermind trying to achieve? And why didn't they do something else that was clearly easier? Thinking in reverse helps you to ask questions. To be like, okay, well, if so-and-so wants to train soldiers to use psychic powers to kill each other, why didn't they do something else? Why didn't they do it in a particular other way? And by thinking about it, you create boundaries for your story. Not so much creating a box, but fencing it, so that you know exactly where the story is going to be taking place and kind of what the feeling of the story is, without even having a main character. We develop the players backwards, and we find places where spots are missing. I haven't even talked about, who's taking place in it. Where did they come from? How did they end up here? But these are questions that follow. As we are working backwards through, well, I want to write a story like this. I want to write a horror story taking place in an Antarctica bunker. Where is it? When is it? Why is this place here? Who ran it? Who built it? Who's in there right now? What's the threat? Where did it come from? Why is it here? What does it want? Asking questions. Instead of thinking, well, I want to have a death game about psychic powers and figuring out where everything lands on the page and figuring out where it takes place, who made it, who made it happen. Sometimes working in reverse helps. It's almost as though when you open yourself up to the questions, you find the answers. You can come up with ideas, fill in the blanks, and formulate a foundation for your story that can help the story feel a lot more complex. I can go on in great lengths about stories. Zombie stories are extra guilty about this when the question always comes up of how did the zombie apocalypse happen? Where did the zombie virus come from? And the answer is always, don't think about it. It doesn't matter. There's no way for the characters to find out. That always kind of bothers me. Because it always kind of feels... Because it's never like, wait until the end. That I can give you the benefit of the doubt. But it's always like, don't worry about it. That always feels as though someone didn't think about it through. As though there is no answer. As though you wanted to write a particular setting, but not actually do the work. Some people will argue about the merits of that. But I think that if you're going to spend a long time, and we're talking months, maybe years writing a novel, you should probably think about it a little. Maybe not in one sitting. Again, ideas find me when I'm out on my walks or I'm taking a shower. But asking questions. Consider this another reminder to not be afraid of asking questions and searching for answers. And welcome to episode 11 of Omakase, a writing advice and inspiration podcast. I hope that last segment didn't go by too quickly. I realized that I was going along, and it's funny because like I had a whole opening bit for that. I had a whole joke that was gonna lead into it that I thought about. I didn't script it. I just thought about it. Listen, I'm above. No, I'm underneath. That makes no sense. Now that I'm thinking about that particular saying I'm above scripting. I'm above scripting my jokes, as opposed to like what, being beneath that. I'm beneath that. Am I beneath scripting my own jokes? See, we're back at the fire hydrant situation, where I'm like, why is it called the fire hydrant when it clearly expels water? Anyhow, I am above or below. I am somewhere located around the idea of scripting a joke. And I had a really dumb joke. I had a dumb joke about death games, and I was like, oh, I played 10 minutes of Fortnite. I came in 15th place. I killed one person. I spent 20 minutes holed up in a building. I think I'm an expert at death games. That was the bit. That was the joke. It's real. That's what happened last night. And, you know, all I'm saying is that I'm just using this podcast as my platform before I become a professional Fortnite player. Hey, guys. That's not funny. That's not funny. And you know that we're at the end of the video, because when the end of the video / podcast shows up, I thank you for watching. I offer a little word of advice. I hope that you have a lovely week between now and the next time we talk, and I hope you get some writing, some editing, some creative work done. If you are listening to this while drawing, or making comics, or doing both, I hope that you have a lovely time, and that you never forget to save your progress, and that you never draw on the same layer without realizing it. And I hope you have fun. And now, welcome to the end of the video club, where we stay until the end of the video. You know we're here because I'm doing, you hear that? That's the sound of me doing the scissor motions with my hands, but not actually playing a scissor sounds because there's no cutting, no editing here in the end screen. There isn't a lot of editing that I do in my videos. It's mostly just to kind of remove times when there's background noise or when I really make a really unfunny joke. But this time around, we're here, no editing. And as a complimentary reward to everyone who pledges $1 and up on Patreon, I will shout out your name. If you're interested in supporting me, getting cool perks, getting to listen to this a week in advance, so consider pledging your support over at patreon.com/mkieran. And now, deep breath that I'm not going to edit out of the video. I'm gonna shout out all the patrons, and I'm gonna shout out the lovely people who treated me to cups of coffee. Thank you for that. First off, in alphabetical order, we have A. Howard. By the way, I know at least one of you cheeky little silly people did something to make me do something, so I hope you're proud of yourselves. We'll get there when we get to the letter E. Atlac. Alistair Baywood. Wait a minute, Alistair, you're a new patron. You pledged like a week ago. Yeah, you've been, as of the recording of this video, you've been a patron for 8 days. Hey, Alistair, thank you for your support. Really appreciate it. Really sweet of you. Patron gives everybody like a default icon if they don't have one, and Alistair's is cute. Alistair Baywood. See, that's an easy name. That's a name I'm not gonna mispronounce, though I could try it. Alistair Baywood. There you go. Everybody gets their name butchered, even if I can get it right. Alyssa Dudley. Amanda Stevens. That bit wasn't as funny as I thought it was gonna be. That bit wasn't as funny. But it's the end of the video. I don't edit the end of the video segment, so that's what you get. That's what you get. Amelia. Amy Palmer. Angela. Aniexo Hoshi. Biting the Sun. Blarg. Brenda. C.E. Richards. Caitlin. And the other Caitlin. Their name is not the other Caitlin. There's just two people named Caitlin. They're both lovely. I love both of you. Okay, wouldn't it be terrible if I was like, I love one of you more than the other? But you will never find out. I don't know if that bit's funny. In post, I might edit that out if I was editing the end segment for the video. Cannibal Lily. Carriette Eccleston. Kathy Lindsay. Christiane. Kristen Dennis. Kristen Lofton. Citro. Welcome back to the Whisper-a-thon. Clem Pastor. Carissa Glasheen. Dwayne Jackson. Eleanor. And now, I joked a few episodes back about people, if anybody... Oh no, sorry, I'm messing with my computer. If anybody who changed their name to all caps will get me to shout it. And lo and behold, Erasos did not only change their icon to a character I like from a video game, has also changed their name to be in all caps and counting them 1, 2, 3 exclamation marks. So if you excuse me, I'm going to turn away from the mic. Erasos! I hope you all enjoyed that. If it sounds terrible, I will edit it out. I even did the thing where I put my hands like in a projection cone around my mouth. Joffrey. Gilbert Gaudreau. Heather Tasker. Irina Phoenix. Janosch Hebatsky. Jaytana Kirkwood. Jeffrey James Williams. Joe. Juan Nunes. K.M. Anderson. K.M. Anderson. I always do that little twist of like the Anderson. Although it should probably formally be K.M. Anderson. Kameshwar Rao Shaluri. Kaylee. Kiel. Kit Lee. Lazy! Oh man, I love shouting Lacey's name. Lacey's so good. but just as good as Lear Killo. I mean, I love Lear. Lear's so good. MT Locatelli. Mark Maruska. Mary Foster Smith. Nicola. Nicole Grissom. Nicolay. Noam Sahar. A lot of N's. A lot of N's this month. Oh, but what about The Last of the Ends novels and tomes? Been a patron for 8 months. Thanks, guys. Pablo. Pat Eichson. Polly Craftwell. Rain Misoa. Raquel Fernandez. Resonance and D. Roa. Shimmer Tales. Sky D White. That is Sky, capital D, period White. Sometimes I make it sound like it's like Sky the White. Is that the wordplay? Oh my god, have I finally gotten it? What is Sky? What is Sky's icon? It looks like it's a dress. Is it a dress? I've always thought it was a dress. It's not, it's a jellyfish. Oh my god, that makes so much more sense. The icons are so small on Patreon, I'm like, that's a dress. Sky the White took a picture of like a dress against the gray background, right? Against the sofa. No, it's a jellyfish. Soul Muse! Listen. I don't want to say that I'm terrible at this. But for the longest time, I make mistakes. I'm human, okay? I burnt out. I had to take days off. That's how bad I was. But I already made this joke in the past, but like, listen, I make mistakes all the time. I make assumptions. And I make choices made based on those assumptions. And for the longest time, I thought Soul Muse's name was Soul Mouse. And it wasn't until Shoutouts that I realized, wait a minute, have I been wrong? Soul Muse has been a patron for 35 months. And I thought, yeah, their name is Soul Mouse. Totally. I picture like a little mouse in my head. But no, but that's not the case. Turns out I was wrong. Sylvia Leitilla, Synexia, Thomas Baker, and Wendy Christopher. And now, I want to give a little shout out, a little and a big shout out to the people who have treated me to cups of coffee. Mark Maruska, double dipping by also buying me a cup of coffee with the little message, thanks. Thank you for your support. And I also got 2 coffees from an anonymous donator who did not leave a message or a nickname. So thank you as well for your support. And now, we're here, at the end of the video club. We all stayed until the end. You all got to listen to my terrible jokes unedited. It's basically like the other videos that I record with my lovely, lovely spouse. It's just say the jokes, Max. Sometimes they land, sometimes they don't. They mostly don't, but that's fine. You miss the shots you don't take, and the jokes you don't say will never be appreciated. So, you gotta give it a try. You gotta go out there, you gotta give it your best. I hope... You can already tell I'm feeling way better. If you were worried about me, worry not. My lovely wife takes very good care of me, and kicks my butt whenever I am being bad. And I'm doing way better. I'm taking more breaks. I'm enjoying more time, not only on my own, but also with my lovely spouse. And life is good. I hope that if you're struggling right now, if you're overworking yourself, I'm waggling my finger, take some time to rest, even if it appears impossible, even if it seems like the last thing you should do. You should listen to your body. That bears repeating. This week's lesson, listen to your body. It's the only one you got. Okay? Okay.